Growing up, the Looney Tunes were to me like the third parent. The one that taught you that it's totally fine to drop an angle on someone's face, as long as it's for comedic effect. They were everything that I liked as a kid. They were chaotic, hilarious, and a bit violent. But hey, I turned out okay. For the most part. And when I wasn't watching Bugs get one over Elmer, I was usually gaming at the time. The whole 90s had a whole buffet of games and licensed games everywhere. You didn't just watch cartoons, you lived them. And guess that's why the Looney Tunes games appealed to me, And of course, almost every other kid in the world, who wouldn't? It was a chance to be Bugs, dodging Elmer, or to be Taz, speeding wildly through levels. Looney Tunes and video games just felt like they were meant for each other when I was a kid. Until I actually played some of them. And today we're not doing a deep dive into every Looney Tunes games ever released. That's a whole rabbit hole, and Tio Game Master already jumped down that rabbit hole. Instead, today's video is a bit more personal. We're looking at a handful of the Looney Tunes games that I played. So yes, it's a selective, very personal list.
Does the Tiny Toons count? No, the Tiny Toons are not Looney Tunes. The Animaniacs are not Looney Tunes either.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Yeah, no, not that far off. Let's skip this fever dream and jump into the Game Boy, where, in my opinion, things really start to get interesting. There's just something right about the Looney Tunes on those really pixelated screens. I don't know, it's just nostalgia. And no, you're not talking about the Crazy Castle games. Its own rabbit hole itself, and it changes from main characters from Bugs to Mickey and Nivik, Woodpecker, so is that even a Looney Tunes series? I don't know. If you're curious for whatever reason, Angry Video Game Nerds has already a ton of videos on that series alone. And no, so whatever, forget about that, moving on. Instead, we'll be playing Looney Tunes on the Game Boy. Just Looney Tunes, no fancy subtitles or anything. I didn't own this one actually, but a friend of mine did. And man, did I borrow it a lot. The guy didn't really care, he wasn't a Looney Tunes connoisseur like I was. But let me tell you, for 6-year-old me, this was it. Looking back at it, it's pretty competent. It's a side-scroller courtesy of Sunsoft. Yeah, Sunsoft, the ones from, Blastmaster and Gimmick. There are 7 levels in total where you switch between the tunes, each with their own boss. So I think it's nice that everyone gets their moment to shine, which is rare for a licensed game to do. They usually just pick one main character and call it a day. So, have the Bugs game, the Daffy game, the Taz game, the Roadrunner game. And this is just fun in my opinion. You can play with all of them. And while level enemies are about as generic as it can be, the gameplay itself holds up enough, It is just enough to keep things fun. Level 1 kicks off with Daffy Duck, where he tosses a boomerang-style disc to attack, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's interesting to work with since it goes back to you, and you can hit enemies from the back. It's interesting, that's what I can say about it. Tweety takes the sky in level 2, where you have to avoid Sylvester and Junior, yeah, Sylvester has a son, in this classic chase level, kinda reminiscent of the cartoons. When Porky takes the wheel in level 3, the game becomes this side-scrolling shooter of all things, where you pilot a biplane? Wait, does planes even have wheels? Anyway, level 4 is a bonus level, and you play as Taz, because of course. Level 5 has Speedy zooming through a haunted castle, dodging ghosts, mummies, and Dracula? Sure, why not? This is just video game logic. Level 6 is an auto-scroller, and of course you play as the Roadrunner, who else, right? Where you have to constantly avoid falling rocks and Willy Coyote. And fucking finally, Bugs wraps things up in level 7, facing off against Elmer Fudd, who's armed with earthquake-inducing jumps, and a shark. yeah, the shotgun part makes sense. Is this game groundbreaking by any means? No. But it has heart, you know? And despite some odd choices here and there, Sunsoft actually nailed it. I gotta give it to that. This might not be one of the crown jewels of the Game Boy, but it still deserves some love. And fun fact, it was originally an OG Game Boy game. Then it later on got the Game Boy Color treatment. Thinking of it like Link's Awakening and Link's Awakening DX. Well, by that logic, where's the Switch remake, you cowards? Oh no, what is that? Anyway, I'm pretty sure that I played it in black and white at the time, and I mean, it was still good enough for me. It has just that vibe that sticks with you. Well, for me, actually, this game is more than just the sum of its pixels. It's a time capsule of that friendship, one that is sadly gone now. You know, he eventually went to another school, life happened, and we lost touch. But those memories, they are here to stay. And Looney Tunes will forever be a piece of my childhood. Moving on. Now, if you're talking about games that follow me to this day, Taz-Mania on the Genesis, released in 1992, is one of them. I mean, it haunts me. That's what I meant. I loved Taz growing up, so I thought I was getting a great time raiding this game, and spoiler ahead, I wasn't. I think was when I learned that licensed games, they usually suck. So the plot is about Taz going off an epic hunt for a legendary giant eggs that his dad told him about, so he can like fry and eat them or something, I don't get it. This plot doesn't really matter, it just has to be serviceable enough for the character. And hey, it is. The problem actually starts on all Taz moves. Like, he moves so slow, like he's trying to walk through quicksand, then somehow he jumps like he's on the moon, meaning platforming is a mess, and this game, man. And his spin, you know, his signature move, it has this absurd acceleration that more than often will just send you flying straight to an enemy, or a wall, or an obstacle, or whatever. It's just pain. And to top it all off, the level design is questionable. They are maze-like stages with items we're supposed to collect, but they are scattered all over the place randomly. Some things will heal you, some will hurt you, and Taz will just eat all of them without a second thought, including bombs. Yeah, Taz will shout down dynamite if you so much as just brush past it. I don't know how to explain, but it's like every single choice this game does was made specifically to make sure you were not having a good time. And don't even get me started on the music that sounds like someone is trying to tune on a radio. I don't guess, I mean that's the best I can guess out of it. They tried to do some of adaptive soundtrack, but all they got was this mess of beeps and boops. I mean, I think I eventually beat this as a kid, mostly because no one else was raining Genesis games by the time I got mine in 1999, so I just kept it. Until I couldn't take it anymore because the store stopped renting Genesis games, so yeah, I stole it. But then there's Taz in Escape from Mars, also for the Sega Genesis. Apparently, Taz was the go-to Looney Tune of the 90s. Even though the dude doesn't even talk, maybe that's the reason. I mean, he doesn't talk, so it's easier to make a 16-bit game out of it. I don't know, I wasn't there. Anyway, this game is technically a sequel, released in 1994, and you know what? It's actually a lot better. Marvin the Martian has captured Taz to his zoo, and your goal is to escape from Mars. Clever title, right? Honestly, it's a step up from the Find the Eggs story from the first game, and this simple plot is enough to take Taz through all sorts of different planets, like Mexico. And they actually improved gameplay a little bit. Taz doesn't feel as much like a brick with a jetpack anymore to begin with, which is nice, that's like already 100 times better. But also the level design on this one is surprisingly solid. Sure, levels can be a little bit maze-like, but they don't feel like a never-ending mess of frustration like the last game. The game also introduced stage-specific gimmicks throughout the game, like shrinking and growing rays that let Taz slip through time spaces or squash enemies, and some levels even let you dig through the ground to reach different areas. Think of Super Mario Galaxy, but decades before that even came out. And in 2D, and not a Sega Genesis, with Taz. Yeah, so nothing like Super Mario Galaxy at all. Anyway, in the music department, game has a lot more going for it. I mean, for starters, it has a legit soundtrack, this time with some very enjoyable groups. Are they all memorable? No, but it's just way better than the first game. But I don't think they nail it completely, the game still has its quirks. You can still accidentally munch on items like bombs or dynamite, like the first game, for example, so what's up with that? I mean, did they really thought this was an essential game mechanic that represents Taz? And you know how in some games you have this knockback when you get hit? Well, both this game and its prequel, you get that even when you defeat enemies, and that just is so frustrating, man, like what the hell. But again, like Looney Tunes on the Game Boy, at least they tried. I mean, is it perfect? No, but it's genuinely fun. And believe it or not, Taz isn't the only one that's starring his own game in the Genesis. You of course have your big hitters like Daffy Duck, Tweety and Sylvester, Speedy Gonzales, and of course the man himself, Bugs Bunny, each with varying degrees of quality. And before we move on from the Genesis, I want to talk about one more game. Desert Demolition, released in 1995. Hey, that's the year I was born. Nice. So anyway, in this quick platformer, you can pick between both the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. Although all the stages are very similar from each other, it doesn't matter with who you are playing, both of them play completely different. For example, as the Roadrunner, you'll be zooming through stages like you are Sonic the Hedgehog. You even got those loop-de-loops from Sonic, apparently that was super impressive by the time. I don't know how technology worked, but it was, and we got this in this game. And I mean, that's all fine and dandy, but a lot of other games try to copy Sonic's formula. The real deal here is playing as Wile E. Coyote. His gameplay is slower, it's a little bit more tactical, where you can use a bunch of Acme contraptions to outsmart stage obstacles and hazards. It's like being dropped right into one of those classic shots of them, where you have to try and catch the Roadrunner. I mean, you will recognize a lot of the gadgets from the cartoons in this game. Most importantly, they are a blast to use. I mean, it could be all references and all, and you could still have that, hey, I know that moment, but if they are not fun to play, I mean, what does it matter, right? But no, they are super fun to play. And visually, Desert Demolition serves up some of the most fluid, slapstick animations of the 16-bit era. Like, everyone won't stop raving about how gorgeous the Aladdin game looks, and yeah, it's impressive, I know Disney animators worked on the game itself, but honestly, Desert Demolition deserves a spot on that conversation, right? I mean, it really does. The animations manages to bring these cartoon characters to life in such a delightful way. Oh, and remember that adaptive music from that disaster of the first Taz game? Well, this game has it, but it's somehow... It just works, despite the sound chip of the Genesis, so you don't even have an excuse, Taz-Mania. Now, this is a pretty short game at the end of the day, but at least it gives you that replayability of playing with the two characters. And in my opinion, it's better to have a short burst of pure fun instead of a long, dragged-out experience like many other games, especially from that era with their artificial difficulty and all. All of that is to say that in my eyes, Desert Demolition is a hidden gem in the Genesis library. And even if you're not a Looney Tunes fan, You owe it to yourself to check it out. And if you are, man, you are in for a treat. So yeah, there are lots of other Looney Tunes games throughout the decade, like the Bugs Bunny Lost in Time duology, and plenty more, but I don't have any personal stories with any of them from now on. Sure, I played one or the other through the ages, but by the time, even as a kid, I just caught on that licensed games were, no, they were not good. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll dive back and try them all. I'm all for this sort of thing and discover new classics and new favorites on all the consoles. Maybe I'll even go down as to make a Tiny Toons or Animaniacs video talking about their games. There's one Tiny Toon game for the Genesis that's just so good, but I don't know if there are other examples. So there's that. I know there's one for the Game Boy Advance, which is weird because by then Tiny Toons has already been off there for like so many years. Anyway, whether you grew up with these or you just remember the Looney Tunes shorts from Saturday mornings, there's just something comforting about revisiting even the not so great stuff. In the end, those games might not always hold up to today's standards, yeah, even the good ones, but they are still a time capsule. A snapshot when cartoons and video games clashed in the 90s in weird, sometimes terrible ways, but they still clashed. So, hats off to them, my old friend who lent me Looney Tunes on the Game Boy, to my Genesis that barely survived Taz-Mania, to anyone else who had a blast, or at least a laugh, revisiting these classics with me. Thank you for watching and subscribe to Nintendo for more questionable nostalgia. See you next time. Bye bye!